Hello my dear friends. Welcome back to Sorry What. My name is Jason and I won't be keeping you for long, but before we start today's story, please show some love by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you, I really appreciate your support. Now on to the story. Hindsight truly is 100%. I suppose I should have been suspicious the first time my wife came home from her job in the art gallery bubbling over a new patron. But when you trust somebody completely, and she's never given you the slightest worry in the 17 years you've been together, your initial inclination is to give her a little slack. My initial inclination was wrong. I'm Bobby Sprague, my wife is Tracy. We met at a small Midwestern university 18 years ago, started dating 17 years ago, and got married 16 years ago. We added a daughter to the mix 14 years ago, and then had a son 12 years ago. I work as a computer programmer for a government agency. I make good but not great money. I did well enough that Tracy was able to be a stay-at-home mom while the kids were little. But 2 years ago, she decided that the kids were old enough for her to stretch her wings, and she got herself a 30-hour-a-week job at an upscale art gallery in town. She was an art major in college, so this was by no means a stretch for Tracy intellectually. She could talk the talk and walk the walk. The gallery primarily catered to clients doing a bit better financially than us. We live in a major Midwestern city, and there were plenty of people in that financial range for the gallery to be doing a nice business. And as a perk of her job, Tracy got to hobnob with these people and step into their world for a little while before coming back home to her humdrum life. Occasionally, we both got to step into their world, as sometimes Tracy would work a big show at the gallery, and I would get to tag along as her plus one. It was exciting, I have to admit, hanging out for a few hours with some movers and shakers. Computer geeks like me don't get to rub elbows with company executives, politicians, attorneys, and bank presidents very often. So every now and then Tracy would come home amped after meeting some celebrity or somebody powerful. The kids and I would marvel at how she just sort of floated along at home for a while. Then we would get out of her way when reality set in as to where in life she fit into the picture. Darkness was not one of Tracy's better qualities. The kids would usually scramble off to their rooms, very often leaving me to take the brunt of her snarky comments about her life for the rest of the evening. Most of the time I just took it in stride. When it got to me, I tinkered on my car in the garage. So for the last several weeks Tracy had been babbling about some hotshot real estate whiz who had recently become a patron at the gallery. Jackson Aloysius Fairchild, a 28-year-old millionaire, had recently moved into expensive new digs and wanted artwork for his walls that reflected his station in life, Tracy had said. She seemed impressed with him in general, although she expressed the thought that he also seemed to be somewhat taken with himself. She mentioned in various conversations that he was handsome and put together well, and often talked about doing a variety of physical activities like bicycling and rock climbing. Tracy gushing over a new patron wasn't out of line, so I didn't think much of it, and let her ramble on for the next 2 weeks. Then this, too, died down, as I expected it would, and I didn't hear another word about Jackson Aloysius Fairchild, until I was being introduced to him at the gallery's Christmas gala just a few weeks ahead of the holiday. I have to admit, he was an impressive physical specimen, about 6'2", 190, and he looked to be rock solid in his expensive Armani suit. He was also blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and extremely handsome, even from my jaded opinion. I wasn't quite expecting that. I talked to him for about 30 seconds while Tracy introduced us, and in just that little bit of time I caught him eyeing my wife from head to toe, like a tiger looking at its prey. Yes, she was gorgeous this night in a blue tailored skirt and jacket combination, with just a hint of cleavage showing from inside her white blouse, but his look was more leer than admiration. Tracy seemed to be too busy with everything that was going on to take notice, but I did. Tracy went off to mingle, and I went off to the bar. I got a shot of Jack Daniels over ice, and found Kenny Taylor, the husband of one of my wife's co-workers, whom I had met before and gotten along with very well. We talked a lot about sports and cars. I talked to Kenny for a while, and then I did some mingling myself. About an hour later I spotted Tracy talking in a small group of people, and Jackson Aloysius Fairchild was draped all over her. I went over to the bar and got her usual drink of choice, a Riesling, and walked up to the group. I introduced myself, then handed Tracy her glass of wine. Then I quietly reached over to Tracy's right hip and removed Jackson's hand, which was resting there from around her back. He didn't say a word, just smirked at me as he brought his hand back to his own body. I talked with the group for a few minutes, then Tracy went off to do some more mingling, and I went off in a different direction, after first making sure Jackson wasn't following her. I expected to see Tracy doing her thing while I moved about mingling with some of her co-workers, but after about an hour I hadn't seen my wife anywhere. After taking a quick look around a second time, I also didn't see Jackson. My spider senses were more than tingling, so I made a concerted effort to find Tracy. I didn't find her in the gallery, so I headed out the front door and started making a loop around the gallery. There were small groups of people talking in the parking lot with their coats on, looking like they were getting ready to leave, but still no Tracy. And then I spotted what appeared to be a couple sitting rather cozy in a black Jaguar XJ. The car was running, the couple was sitting together tightly in the back seat. I didn't bother to see if it was Tracy and Jackson. I assumed so, walked up to the car, and opened the door next to the woman. The occupants jumped back at that, so all I could ascertain was that if they weren't kissing, they were getting close to it. "Time to go, dear. Now," I said in my best polite but firm tone. We were just," Tracy stammered as Jackson smirked at me. "I don't care. It's time to leave," I said in a voice just above a whisper. "Really, Bobby, you have to come in and hear this sound system," Jackson said. "It's absolutely crystal." The stereo was on, playing some sort of concert music, but I don't think either of them was listening to music. "Another time, Jackson. We really must be going," I said in my most non-committal voice. I escorted my wife from the car, and we started walking to where my Ford F-150 was parked. "Wait, I can't leave yet. The party's got another 2 hours. I'm expected to stick around for the whole thing and be one of the hostesses," Tracy said with an urgency to her voice. "If your boss has a problem with this, he can call me directly," I said. "Just what the hell do you think you were doing?" We were really listening to his car's sound system. "It's amazing," she said with a note of awe in her voice. "Aha," I replied, no note of awe in my voice. Tracy continued to play innocent, but things were cool between us for the next couple of weeks. But I eventually lightened up and things got back to our usual existence, so I was completely taken by surprise a few months later, when Tracy told me she accepted an invitation to Jackson's Lake Cottage for the 4th of July weekend. It was to be us, Tracy's boss and his wife and 2 other married couples that were friends of Jackson's. We were heading up on Friday afternoon and would stay until midday Sunday, and Jackson was grilling for both days, with a full bar, swimming, boating and whatever else was available. I started to protest, but Tracy just said we were doing it, turned around and walked away from me. Actually, the weekend started out great. We spent several hours out on the lake in Jackson's rather large sailboat. All the women looked great in their bikinis, and the guys at least didn't look too bad in their baggy suits. Truthfully, Jackson probably had the best body among the 5 guys there, although thankfully it didn't look like he was hung any better than the rest of us, and Tracy, despite being the second oldest of the 5 women, was probably the best built on the Dista side. Her black bikini showed off her 36C boobs and bubble bum, without being leaving too much skin out there, I thought. Jackson had one hell of grill set up in the backyard at his cottage, and even had a completely stocked fridge with beer and wine and ice for mixed drinks. He brought out a mess of marinated steaks and started setting them on the grill, while everybody sat around in chairs just off the grill area with the drink of their choice. Jackson was being a gracious host, and was so far minding himself around Tracy, who seemed to be staying just a bit further away from him than she had at Christmas. The night went great and we all went to our respective bedrooms at about midnight, with Jackson as the lone single person going off by himself to the master bedroom. Saturday started off with a visit to the little town connected to the lake. It was a little tourist trap with all sorts of cute little shops, and most of the women came home with several items. Then we ate a sumptuous lunch of hero sandwiches before a volleyball game broke out. The libations started after we finished with the activity, and the night's grilling was sausage and shredded pork. We enjoyed another great meal, and after sitting around shooting the breeze for a couple of hours, Tracy's boss, Lou, suggested he and I take a walk around the lake. Considering everything that we were all eating and drinking, I thought that was a great idea to get ready for round 2. It took us about 30 minutes to get around the lake, and when we got back the group had shifted from the table to the chairs and lounges. I wasn't real happy when I saw Tracy sitting in a lounge chair leaning back against Jackson, with his hands around her waist. As we came up, Tracy smiled and got up off Jackson, but she didn't seem to be in too much of a rush, although she had to know I wouldn't be too pleased. She never really looked me in the face, but came over and sat in the chair next to me for much of the rest of the night. I caught her and Jackson exchanging glances a few times during the evening when they thought I wasn't looking. Like the night before, the party started to break up about midnight, but while the other 3 couples started heading to their respective bedrooms, Tracy quietly asked me to join her in the kitchen. When we got there, she looked me straight in the eye for the first time all evening, and announced, "Jackson has asked me to sleep in his bed tonight." I accepted his proposal. I must have passed out or something and hit my head, because I thought Tracy just told me she was going to sleep with Jackson in his bed. I looked at her like she had 3 eyes, and she realized that I wasn't exactly sure I heard her correctly. "This has nothing to do with love. This is purely about sex, Bobby, she started. I've been completely faithful to you for 17 years, you are the only man I love. But I want to have sex with Jackson. He excites me, and I want to see what a different man feels like. After tonight, I will go back to being your completely faithful wife for the rest of our lives, but I think you owe me one night. I don't know how long I stood there with my mouth hanging open. My wife just told me she was going to sleep with another man, because she wanted to, and I owed her that. Over my ducking dead body, you're going to sleep with him, I finally blurted out. This is not a negotiation, Bobby. Accept it for what it is. Tonight I'm his. Tomorrow, and for the rest of my life, I'll be yours. Don't be too sure of that, babe. Remember, there are consequences to every action. God damn it, Bobby, she half whispered to me. Do you have to see everything so black and white? It's one night, for God's sakes. One night and done. And you're going to ruin everything for everybody. One night. We never thought you'd be so intractable. I probably should have just kept my mouth shut and gone behind your back, but I was afraid if you found out about that, we were definitely finished. So I figured if you knew and let me go, it wouldn't be cheating. She turned on her heel and left. As I came out of the kitchen and headed into the living room, I saw Tracy take Jackson's hand and walk toward the master bedroom. I think the blurriness of my vision was due to tears falling from my eyes. I walked over to the indoor bar and poured myself a shot of Jack. It took me about 5 minutes to finish it, and when I did I walked toward the master bedroom and stood outside the door, very quietly. I could hear the sounds of two people having sex. My life as I knew it was over. I drank several shots of Jack trying to figure out what I was going to do next. My first instinct was to leave and seek a divorce as soon as possible. But the thought of having to give up my kids for most of the time didn't sit well with me. I couldn't see anything good coming out of that decision for either me or them. On the other hand, my wife was in another man's bed at that very moment, so I knew I just couldn't take that lying down. I briefly thought of burning the house down and killing all of us, but sanity got the better of me. Then I think I passed out for a while, because when I looked at my watch it was 3 a.m., and all was quiet in the house. I staggered to the bedroom that Tracy and I had been assigned. The bed was still made because it was empty, as I knew it was going to be. I lay down right on top of the bedspread, and slept fitfully for the next few hours, rising at 7:30. I went into the adjoining bathroom, took a quick shower, and brushed my teeth before walking to the kitchen. The other 3 couples were already up and were eating a breakfast of bacon and eggs. Marna, the wife of Tracy's boss, Lou, was apparently the chief cook, and she offered me up a plate, while the others grunted their good mornings. It was apparent from the way everyone was sort of looking at me from the corners of their eyes, that they were well aware of what had transpired. I know my face was flushed and hot because the humiliation level was through the roof. It's okay, Bobby. We've all seen this before, Marna said sympathetically, while the others nodded their heads in agreement. Jackson's done this 3 or 4 other times. He's an alpha male, and when he sees something he wants, he goes after it. It's just the way he's hardwired. I also tend to think he's pretty big on the humiliation aspect of it, too, and I think the women fall right into it, too, Lou added. But I don't think it's anything personal. It's just the way he is. So what's happened to those other couples he's done this to? I inquired. Well, as far as I know, they're all still married. Seems kind of silly to split up a long-time marriage over a one-night stand or so, when you come right down to it, Marna said. Especially when there's kids involved and everything, Joanne, one of the other wives, added. You mean he trolls for married women with children, so the wives can use the kids as leverage for the affair? I asked incredulously. Kind of looks like he does, chimed in Ralph, Joanne's husband. But he's really a good guy except for that one little quirk. I've known him since college, and if you're a friend of his, you've got a friend for life. So I can forgive him the one quirk, especially since it doesn't seem to hurt the couples in the long run. In fact, I know Jackson got his last love interest and her husband a sweet deal on a condo in North Carolina last year, and Jackson gets to stay with them when he's in the area. Just then we started hearing some moaning coming from the master bedroom. It was Tracy, and I knew by the sounds that sleeping with Jackson last night apparently included this morning as well. Everyone at the table turned red with embarrassment, while I turned white with rage. Why don't we finish breakfast on the deck? Marna suggested. Tracy and Jackson joined us out on the deck about 30 minutes later, showered and looking very pleased with themselves. I have to admit, Tracy was positively glowing, and didn't seem too reticent about everybody knowing what she had just been doing. She was holding a plate of breakfast, and immediately came over to the chaise I was sitting on and sat down on the edge, while I moved my feet for her. She had her back to me at that point, but I could see how pink her back was from the top of her tank top. I could also make out what appeared to be a bite mark on her right shoulder, just under the strap of her tank in her bra. She didn't offer me a greeting other than a nod when she sat down, and I didn't see any reason to break the silence. So what are everybody's plans for this afternoon? Jackson said in a convivial host voice. I think we need to get back and give the kids a bit of us this afternoon, don't you, sweetie? I said to Tracy's back. She hesitated for a second, and I could see by the way her hair and head moved that she was rolling her eyes at me. It's just one of those things you know when you've been together for as long as we have. Since she was sitting facing everyone else, they all got to see the eye roll, and it took everything in my power not to reach over and slap the back of her cheating head. I was hoping we could stick around a bit and maybe go out sailing again, dear, she answered flatly. Nope. We definitely need to get back. You finish breakfast. I'll get the car loaded. Wheels moving in 10, I said as I headed back inside. I got the car loaded in record time. Tracy was just finishing her breakfast when I went back to the deck. I grabbed her by her wrist, waved at everyone, said a rushed goodbye to the group en masse, and practically dragged Tracy to the car. I didn't have to look in anyone's eyes to see what they were thinking. I knew because I was already thinking it. With the exception of the radio playing, we drove in silence for the first 45 minutes, with Tracy mostly staring out the passenger window. I think she was afraid that if she looked straight ahead and I could see her face, the explosion would start, so she just kept looking away from me. I finally couldn't take it anymore. Was it worth it? I half hissed, half spoke to her. She didn't move for a couple of seconds, then I saw her take a deep breath. She turned toward me. Yes. Yes it was. It was wonderful, she cooed with a faraway look in her eyes. Not exactly the answer I expected. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I didn't figure on her telling me the awful truth. I maybe expected some stammering, a little truth, a lot of backpedaling, maybe an apology, but not the whole truth. And I could tell by the look on her face that it indeed was the truth. 17 years, 2 kids, everything we've built together done in one night then? I asked. She turned her body a bit more toward me in her seat and gave me a sad, almost resigned look. That's up to you, Bobby, she said. Like I promised you, this was a one-time thing only, and now I'll be yours every bit as faithfully as I was before last night. It was an amazing night, and now it's over, but if you can lose your love for me that quickly and break up our family, then you do what you need to do. But trust me, I'll get the kids, and I'll make sure they know you ruined our family. I was stunned into silence. Not even an apology. And she'd be blaming me for the breakup of our family. She and Jackson sure had this planned out well. I'd never seen this side of Tracy before, and I certainly didn't like it. So I can assume then that this morning's activity with Jackson was a calculated act done for the humiliation factor? I asked. Not totally. He wanted to get one more time in before I became the faithful wife of my husband. He's willing to live by my rules. We stopped at the in-laws to pick up the kids. When we got there, it was like nothing had changed for Tracy. Despite the fact that I got along great with Tracy's parents Ron and Judy, I could barely face them. I felt like they somehow knew that Tracy had clucked at me, and I felt ashamed and humiliated. I wanted to scream out the truth about their daughter, but knew this wasn't the time or place. Tracy had a bemused look on her face the whole time we were there. She was definitely enjoying my discomfort and having the upper hand. This was definitely the wrong way to go about making amends, I thought to myself. Tracy got into bed after I did at the end of the night. I was facing away from her, and she climbed in and spooned behind me. I then felt her hand reach around and grab my stick. After she worked me up and down twice, I turned around to face her, and slowly shook my head no. Not happening tonight, I said. There's not a damn thing you can do that's going to get me up for you. You'll just have to be satisfied with what asshole gave you last night and this morning. For the first time since Saturday night, Tracy showed weakness. She looked hurt and shocked at my refusal of her advances for one of the very few times in our lives together. But don't you want to reclaim my kitty as your own? Jackson says it's almost like an automatic response for men in situations like this. Oh, did he now? So not only is he a real estate genius, but he's also a sex therapist as well. Well, then he should have warned you that some men don't take what you did as a sexual challenge. Some of us take it as a complete betrayal, and throwing up might fit the bill more than a duck. Tracy's eyes opened wider than they already were. Never in our 17 years together had I ever talked to her this way, and I had never cursed at her before. She had removed her hand from around my stick, so I rolled over and pretended to go to sleep. I heard her quietly crying. I didn't care. I got an appointment with a reputable divorce attorney for the next week. The meeting did not go well, to say the least. Marcus Rothstein had to explain to me twice that my options were indeed limited to basically giving up half my sheet and my kids, or waiting it out for the sake of the kids, and then giving up half of my sheet if we divorced once they were of age. We all know parents who live their lives through their kids, then when the kids leave home, the parents really don't have anything in common anymore and get divorced. That was basically the scenario that my attorney laid out for me. Be a super parent for the next 6 years, then divorce Tracy as soon as the kids were not an issue. At least in my case, I didn't have to worry about Tracy running around if she was telling me the truth about keeping her promise. So that's what I did. If my kids were involved in an activity, I was usually the parent in charge, and I made sure that Tracy was involved as well. Why should I be the only one to have to sit through a stamp club fundraiser, or work on a 4-H woodworking project? We were the parents who everybody looks up to and shakes their heads about. On the physical side, I didn't touch Tracy sexually for 6 months, until she told me that she was going to have to start stepping out if I wasn't willing to do my husbandly duties. Since I was ready to bust a nut myself, literally I was able to reason to myself that I could have sex with Tracy the way she did with Jackson, just sex, nothing else. After all, she was still a beautiful woman. It's not like I was being forced to have sex with a troll. It wasn't pretty, but our first night back in the saddle set the tone for what was going to happen the next few years. We had a date night to one of our favorite Italian places, and I plied Tracy with 2 more glasses of wine than her usual. Since she hadn't had any sex for the last 6 months except with her favorite toy, she was a little more randy than normal, and when I suggested we turn in while the kids were watching a movie, she didn't even hesitate. We were like 2 teenagers as we stripped down. After 30 seconds of lip-locking each other, I pushed her back on the bed, and gently rubbed 2 fingers along her dripping kitty. And then she moaned, not just any moan, but the exact same moan we all heard at the lake cottage, when she ducked Jackson Aloysius Fairchild that Sunday morning. Something clicked in my head at that moment, and rage became my best friend. Without even another thought, I drove my rock-hard stick into her in 2 tight strokes, and I know that had to hurt her, because, honestly, it hurt me to do it. I spent the next 20 minutes pounding Tracy's kitty like a man possessed, banging my clock into her cervix time after time as I ducked her. About 5 minutes and she's yelling my name in a guttural tone, then she stiffened before having perhaps the biggest O I've ever given her with my stick. I pushed hard all the way through it, grunting like a wild man, and she wound up having 2 more intense O's, before I finally filled her with the most cum I've ever shot in her. We then lay coupled for about 10 more minutes before we disengaged. "Where the hell did that come from?" she sage whispered to me. "Holy shit, Bobby. Am I going to have to wait another 6 months for a repeat performance?" I couldn't really answer that question, so I said nothing and spooned into her back. I've got to admit that every time I thought about Tracy with Jackson, I became enraged, and there was nothing tender in our lovemaking then. Hell, it wasn't even lovemaking then, it was pure ducking. She seemed to enjoy herself, though, and never complained, although we rarely cuddled afterwards and talked tenderly, like had been our pattern before the incident. Things seemed back to what I figured was going to be the new normal for us, but for 1 week every month, I had a private investigator follow her, just to see if she was keeping her word to me, and not seeing Jackson or anyone else for that matter. I spent a lot of money getting a little peace of mind. 6 years later, our youngest child, Terry, left for college at Michigan State. Melissa was a junior at Michigan, so when Terry made his decision, we had a small war among the kids for the entire summer, before they both left for their respective schools. As Terry was just a freshman, he was staying on campus in a dorm, and Tracy and I helped him move in a week before classes started. Neither Tracy nor I remember taking half the stuff with us that Terry did. We took him up to Michigan State on a Thursday and stayed through almost the whole weekend, finally leaving for home late Sunday. Exactly 30 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, First Conference called both kids and quietly and calmly told them I was divorcing their mother, because she cheated on me with another man several years before. They were both devastated. "I thought you guys were so great together. How could this happen?" Melissa practically shouted into the phone. "I always thought we were great together, too, but your mother cheated on me with Jackson Aloysius Fairchild 6 years ago when we were up there with several other couples for a 4th of July weekend. She told me she was going to do it first so she wouldn't be sneaking around behind my back, and then told me she would remain faithful to me for the rest of our lives together. She didn't see it as cheating, but I did, and I told her then that I wouldn't put up with it. There would be consequences if she went through with it. But apparently she and Jackson had been planning this, and she told me that if I left her, not only would she get half of our stuff, but she'd wind up getting both of you as well, and she would turn you both against me. I couldn't lose you two as well, so I capitulated and just endured until you both came of age, and I was sure you would understand." Terry spoke up first. "I'll be damned," he exclaimed. "Did she give you any kind of reason for pulling this sheet? Other than he just wanting to have sex with a man she considered hot? Not really. She just figured I would cave in so I wouldn't lose you too, and to a point she was right." "Is she still screwing around, Dad?" Melissa asked. "Not as far as I can tell, baby," I answered. I've had a pie following her for 1 week a month since then, and as far as you can tell, she's kept her promise and not screwed around. Then why can't you forgive her, Dad? Terry asked tentatively. You've been married for what, 22 years, and she's only done it the once. Once was more than enough, Terry, I said, trying to hold my building rage in check. What kind of love did she have for me when she spent the night in another man's bed? What kind of respect did she show me when she had sex with him the next morning, while we could all hear the two of them going at it? I'm sorry, kids. I don't have it in my heart to forgive her. I stayed with her to keep the family together. I love you guys. Thanks, Dad. We really appreciate you holding it together for us, Melissa answered. Does she already know? Terry asked. She will know in just a few minutes. She's being served at her office. Oh, Dad, bad move, Melissa said. In front of her boss and co-workers, she'll be crushed and humiliated. Don't do this to her, Dad. Too late, baby. Besides, I planned it this way on purpose. Her boss and his wife were among the other people up at the lake house when this went down, and if you don't think I was already humiliated enough, imagine how I felt when your mother started to moan while having sex with Jackson the next morning. I wanted to shrivel up and die. So, no, I completely want her to feel the sting of humiliation. Well, I don't agree with this, Dad. I guess I understand it, Melissa answered back. I'm on board, Dad. I've got your back completely, Terry chimed in. My cell rang at 4:07. Yes, I answered. I'm on my way home now, you bastard, and when I get there I'm going to kick your balls all the way to next week, Tracy shrieked into the phone. My money was on contrite and tearful. Just goes to show you what I know. I answered back before ending the call. I sat in the family room watching ESPN until I heard the garage door go up and Tracy's car pull in. I shut off the TV and stood up. If she was going to attack me, I wanted to be in a position to defend myself. I had never hit a woman to that point, but I was going to if I had to. Like usual, Tracy came in through the utility room, and she looked to be on fire. She marched right up to me until I turned slightly to my right, so she couldn't kick me in the balls with her right foot, which was her dominant side. It's an old fighter's trick. I also raised both my hands in a defensive posture. At that point, Tracy stopped, looked me up and down like she was trying to figure out a way to hit me, then crumbled onto the sofa in tears. I thought we were good. I thought we were good, she muttered. You never said anything in all these years about divorcing me. You were good, so you assumed we were good, I said calmly. But I kept my promise to you. I haven't slept with anyone since Jackson at the lake. And I wasn't going to sleep with anyone else ever again. You did keep your promise. The 16 years before that you made me a vow, which you just tossed in the garbage can that night. I told you then not to do it, but you were going to do it anyway, and threatened me with taking away my kids. I couldn't let you do that. And you had me served at the gallery, in front of Lou and all of my co-workers. Could you get any more cruel? She rasped. I felt having Lou there just completed the circle you started at the lake house 6 years ago. And as far as Crow, your Sunday morning ducking with all of us in the house was the single most humiliating moment of my life. You bet I was getting my revenge. Tracy continued sobbing, but I could see the seed of recognition on her face. You told me 6 years ago you thought it was worth it to duck Jackson Aloysius Fairchild. That it was wonderful. Still feel that way now. But I've kept my promise to you. I've been completely faithful since then, over 6 years, she whined. So what's the over-under on a promise from you? I replied quickly. If your vow was only good for 16 years, is your promise good for half that, say 8 years? Bobby, I'm truly sorry if that one incident leads to us getting a divorce, but I told you about it. I didn't cheat. Yes, you did, I insisted. Just because you told me about it beforehand instead of sneaking around behind my back doesn't make it right. We didn't discuss it, you and he did. We didn't agree to that, you and he did. And then you broke your vow to me. You're sorry about the divorce it's causing, but you're not sorry about the act. You've never been sorry about the act. I didn't give you a hall pass. We didn't come to some sort of agreement that you could have a hall pass. You just gave yourself one, and figured I'd accept your dumbest decision. You ripped my heart out that weekend, Tracy, and on the ride home you told me it was my problem, and I had to get over it, or you take my kids away. Does that sound like love to you? Because it sure doesn't to me. She just looked at me stunned. Tracy got herself a good lawyer, and he convinced the judge that we needed couples counseling. At the very first session, the counselor, a good-looking young woman of about 30, asked me why I thought I couldn't get past Tracy cheating on me just one time, especially since she didn't go behind my back and sleep with Jackson. I looked at her like she had two heads, then I asked her if she had ever been married, not seeing any rings on her left hand. My marital status has nothing to do with your answer, Mr. Sprague, she said, more than a little defensively. Wrong answer exactly, I said as I got up to leave. The two women sat there motionless as I left. I got a phone call later that night from Ron and Judy, Tracy's parents. I dearly loved Tracy's parents. My own parents had both died several years ago, and I had gotten even closer to Ron and Judy after their death. They returned my love heartily, but I knew they had to side with their daughter on this. It's just what a parent does. I hadn't talked to them since Tracy was served several weeks back. They were both on the line, on speaker. Judy started the conversation after the pleasantries. "Bobby, why do you have to be such a hard ass about this?" she said. "You know Tracy loves you with all of her heart. You know she's kept her promise to you about never having sex with anyone else ever again. Why do you have to be so intractable?" "What exactly did she tell you guys about that weekend?" I asked. "Well, dear, she told us that you two talked about her having sex with some guy for one night, and then she promised she would be faithful to you forever after. She told us that she told you instead of sneaking around behind your back, like she could have, because she really loves you and doesn't want to lose you." "That's about half the story, Mom. You two sitting down. Say what you need to say, Bobby." "We're sitting," her father answered curtly. "We didn't talk about her having sex with Jackson Aloysius Fairchild. She and Jackson talked. I was told that I had no say in the matter. It was going to happen, and if I wanted to make waves that she would get the kids and turn them against me. I warned her not to do it, but that didn't make one damn bit of difference. So they had their fun that night, and just to make sure, they had some fun one more time that morning, with the rest of us sitting in the living room to start, until your daughter got too loud, so we moved out to the backyard. I've never been so humiliated in my life, until the ride home when Tracy told me how wonderful the sex had been." Does that sound like a loving wife? Does that sound like someone who really gives a shit about her husband? Not to me, it doesn't. "But you stayed with her for 6 more years?" her father asked. "No, I stayed with my children for 6 more years, and after a while I even went back to ducking your slut of a daughter. But the love started dying that night, and has continued to die a little more each day. I will never love her like I once did." I heard Judy crying. "We're sorry, son, we didn't know the full story," Ron said. "We should have realized it had to be worse for you to just walk away. Thanks for staying all those years for the kids." With Tracy and her lawyer trying everything they could to stall things, the divorce took about a year. I don't know, maybe Tracy figured I would lose my will to fight and just stay married. She should have known that wasn't going to happen. Although I didn't realize it at the time, my being an involved parent as my kids grew up really kept my standing high in social circles, and also gave me a look into the personal lives of some of the other parents. I got to know a lot more divorcees in my age group than I would have normally, and I used that knowledge to my benefit when my divorce finally became official. I took day trips or hit a restaurant and dance club on the weekends, and almost always had an entertaining companion. Many were the divorced mothers of my kids' friends, and others were the friends of friends. I guess the old saying that it's out there if someone wanted to look for it was right. I was actually having more sex and with more partners than I had before I was married. Life wasn't bad if I ignored the hole in my heart that Tracy put there. I had moved into a 3-bedroom condo after the divorce because I wanted to have room for my kids to stay with me if and when they wanted. I know they were pissed at Tracy initially after the divorce, but I figured they'd eventually get over that, and maybe split time between the two of us, until they moved out permanently. For their sake, I had hoped they and Tracy would come to some sort of an agreement, but I wasn't going to be the one to broker that deal. Tracy did all 3 of us wrong, and I wasn't going to try to smooth her way back into the kids' lives. While it didn't surprise me that both kids chose to live with me during their breaks from college, what did surprise me was how quickly Tracy's parents came back into the fold. I hadn't heard from them much during the proceedings, which I totally understood, but about 2 months after the divorce became official, I got a phone call from Judy asking me if I could meet her and Ron for dinner at Maggiano's, a nice Italian restaurant in our city. Considering how well we got along prior to the divorce, I couldn't see any reason not to go, and the 3 of us had a great evening out. The evening started out uncomfortably as both Ron and Judy apologized for both Tracy's behavior, and for any animosity that might have built up because they supported her at least until they found out the rest of the story, so to speak. I told them the apologies were accepted, and I understood about them supporting their daughter. I then asked them if we could change the subject, and the evening got better from that point on, despite the occasional comment and tears over what might have been. Getting Ron and Judy back into my life gave me a better sense of normalcy, and I think they enjoyed my company as much as I valued theirs. We rarely talked about Tracy, except maybe when we were reminiscing about some event or other from the past. We were probably getting together a couple of times a month while the kids were at school, and when they got home, we were together even more. It was only a matter of time then, when I introduced a sixth person into our little get-togethers. Amy and I had started to date about 18 months after the divorce. I had been dating around at this point, not really looking for Ms. Right, when Amy and some friends walked into a restaurant where the kids and I were having a Saturday night meal. She and her 3 women friends were seated just a table away, and while I wasn't paying too much attention, my kids were on top of things for me. "Hey Dad, see those women that just sat down?" Melissa asked somewhat under her breath. "They're all good looking, and 3 of them aren't wearing wedding rings." "Jesus, Melissa, I don't need you to be my wingman," I responded. "She's right, Dad. There's some wattage at the table," Terry added. So I looked over. The kids were right. "Sheet. Maybe I do need you as my wingman," I said to Melissa. We finished dinner. I drove, so I gave my car keys to Melissa and told the kids I would find an Uber home. I then went and introduced myself to the table of lovely ladies, who quickly invited me to join them. I sipped a shot of Eagle Rare Bourbon while they ate. "Did you just teach your kids to flirt with us? What kind of a dad are you?" queried the long-haired blonde, Jennifer, who sat at my 10 o'clock on the round table. "I'm a dad who knows his kids have good taste, so when they pointed out that 3 of you weren't wearing wedding rings, I had 2 choices. Head home to watch a baseball game and get the shit tossed out of me by those very same kids, or come over here, maybe make a complete fool out of myself, but at least gain more respect from the kids. And they've always told me that it's just as easy to love a good-looking stepmom as it is an ugly one." "Wow. That's some shtick you've got going there, big guy," said the married brunette at my 2 o'clock. "Not a shtick, just a confident guy with 2 bright, mouthy children with good taste, too, I might add. So, are you the house mother here?" They all cackled at that, even Rose, the one I was picking on. "And for that one, big guy, you get to tell your story to the class first," she responded with a smile. So I gave 4 almost strangers the Reader's Digest version of my life, quickly going over my former 17-year marriage and subsequent divorce. "Not good enough, Romeo. If you're such a great guy, how did the wife get away?" asked Angelique, the raven-haired goddess at my 8 o'clock. "There are 3 of us here who have been the divorce route, so we want to know early if we should even be wasting our time talking to you." "Correct, I like that," I responded. For the first time since I got divorced 2 years ago, I laid out my whole story, even the painful parts. Up until then, the only ones who knew the whole story were Tracy's parents and my divorce lawyer. It was uncomfortably quiet when I finished my tale. I saw tears in everybody's eyes. Hell, I had tears in my own. "Well, that's one way to bring the room down," said Carol as she touched my right arm from my 4 o'clock. "I'm sorry, ladies. I try not to dwell on the past. Look on the bright side, I got 2 great kids out of the deal, and my in-laws aren't too bad, either." "Your in-laws? You've got to be kidding me," gasped Angelique. "Now you're stretching my bounds of belief. Nobody likes their in-laws that much, especially after a divorce." "What can I say? I'm special." "If you guys are finished eating, this round of drinks is on me. My turn to hear your stories," I said. We sat there through 3 more rounds until I had heard everybody's story. Jennifer was divorced because her spouse was a serial cheater. Angelique and Carol's marriages had dissolved due to irreconcilable differences. And Rose has been married to the world's best husband for 26 years. She called him the world's best husband several times, and every time she did, the other 3 nodded their heads in agreement. This is a man I have to meet. The woman told me they get together for a girls' night out once a month, so my being there was sort of breaking the rules for Rose. But Rose offered that if she could bring her husband to the next outing, then I could come as well, if I wanted. The other 3 agreed quickly. "Can I bring a date?" I asked cheekily. The 6 of us got together at the same restaurant a month later. I got to meet Sean, Rose's husband, and came away from that meeting thinking he just might really be the world's best husband. We hit it off instantly. The 6 of us continued to go out to eat on a monthly basis, and I began seeing the 3 unmarried women on a social basis as good friends. Sometimes we would do things as a group of 4, sometimes me and one of the women would actually go on a date. Several of the dates ended up with us having sex, sometimes making love, sometimes ducking. They were all great in the sack, whichever way we did it, and I made sure that each of them was given my best, which always includes me going down on a woman. I like it tremendously and I think I'm pretty good at it, and judging by the screaming orgasms I got from all 3, I think the women enjoyed it tremendously. After about a year, Angelique and I became exclusive. I still remained good friends with Jennifer and Carol, but it was understood by all concerned that exclusive meant exactly that, although when the girls got together, sometimes the bantering could get a little rough, even for me. My kids got comfortable with Angelique pretty quickly. It took the in-laws just a little longer to warm up to her. I got it, and I didn't push it. A steady girlfriend for me meant that their slim hopes of Tracy and I reconciling were fading fast. But I think they came to see the same thing that I saw in Angelique, and since the two of them and I had such a strong bond, I think it was just a matter of time before they felt natural with her, and started to show her why I thought so highly of them. After Angelique had been with the in-laws about a half dozen times, Judy took me aside from the others, and said we needed to talk. She looked as serious as a heart attack, so I was a little worried that my family bliss was about to explode. "Bobby, maybe I don't have the right to say this, but too bad, I'm saying it anyway," she started. "How long have you been dating this woman? Don't you think it's time you put a ring on her finger before somebody else gets that bright idea?" I tried my best to match the serious expression on her face, but I was smiling ear to ear on the inside. "When your ex-mother-in-law sees it, well, I guess she was right." "You're right, Mom. I need to lock this girl up. I guess I've been a little gun-shy," I said. "Do it soon, you big lug," she responded. I took Angelique back to Maggiano's for her 47th birthday about 6 weeks later. I told her to dress for the event, and was treated to the sight of her version of the little black dress. Since Angelique was not able to conceive, she didn't have any pregnancies, and her body looked like that of a 35-year-old, with her boobs having no sag, and her midsection still being taut. I know she spent considerable time at the gym as well, so it wasn't just about not having kids. The dress was about 5 inches above her knees, and was cut low in front to show some of her beautiful 36Es. Heads turned all night long, and I barely managed not to drool during dinner. We both ordered cheesecake for dessert, and our waiter came back carrying a tray with 2 pieces and a bottle of champagne. "We didn't order the champagne," Angelique whispered to me. "We didn't." "I did," I whispered back. "It's for drinking right after I slip this ring onto your finger." I had gone to my favorite jeweler after Judy talked to me and had him make me a custom diamond engagement ring. I thought he did a great job. Apparently so did Angelique, who started crying as soon as she saw it. I'm pretty sure there was a yes somewhere in the middle of all that blubbering. We had a simple spring wedding. Terry was my best man. Rose was Angelique's matron of honor. No, I didn't invite Tracy. Even though I know it hurt Ron and Judy, I did not consider my ex-wife a friend. The only time we were together is when it was something to do with the kids. We were cordial when we were together, but unlike some people who can get over their divorce and actually become friends, that wasn't going to happen for me. I couldn't forget the disrespect, and if you don't forget, I don't think you really forgive. My kids eventually forgave Tracy, and that's fine with me. She is their mother, but I don't ask about her, and the kids don't volunteer information about her, the same with Ron and Judy. Angelique seemed to get on pretty good with Tracy when we were all together. I'm okay with that, because Angelique is her own person and can choose who she befriends. Again, we don't really talk about it. 2 of the times we got together after our wedding was for Melissa's wedding, and then Terry's. I was a very proud father on both occasions, and I wasn't going to let anything detract from my kids' big days. Grandchildren started coming a couple of years after both got married, and then I got to see a side of Angelique I never anticipated. While Tracy and I were both thrilled to be grandparents, Grandma Angel was absolutely beside herself with joy. Apparently she had a lot of maternal itches that needed to be scratched, so to speak, and the grandkids helped fill the bill. She was absolutely ridiculous. Tracy eventually married again, and then divorced again, and then married a 3rd time, and divorced a 3rd time. Angelique commented to me that she thought Tracy was looking for another version of me, but just couldn't find one. She wanted me to promise her that I'd never leave her. "I don't have to promise you that," I answered. "I made you a vow." And that's it for today. If you enjoyed today's story, drop a like and comment before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any video. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you soon for our next story.